Eva Braun.
A woman with no formal involvement in politics nonetheless enjoyed privileges derived from her proximity to the leader of one of the most brutal fascist regimes of the 20th century. Despite living in close physical and emotional proximity to Adolf Hitler, she remains largely absent from the official historical record of Nazi Germany. Eva Braun only formally acquired the status of wife when the regime was on the verge of collapse. Their wedding was conducted with minimal ceremony and was fleeting, lasting less than 2 days before she chose to end her life alongside her husband. This raises a fundamental question. Who, in reality, was Eva Braun within Hitler's private world? An innocent outsider untouched by politics, or a figure whose silence existed in parallel with power and atrocity? To address this question and to understand how a woman situated so close to the center of power could remain outside the political sphere, it is necessary to re-examine the entirety of her life. Based on scarce documentation and fragmented post-war testimonies, Eva Braun remains one of the most difficult figures of the Nazi era to categorize. As the Third Reich approached its final collapse and many of Hitler's closest associates turned away from him, his long-concealed companion made the decision to remain at his side. From this moment onward, a series of unresolved issues emerge. Was her choice motivated by genuine love and absolute loyalty, leading her to follow her husband to the end? Or was it instead the acceptance of an inevitable conclusion once the privileges upon which she had depended had disintegrated? Irma Ilse Ida Greiser was born on the 7th of October, 1923, in Reken, a rural village in Mecklenburg, Germany. The area was a low-lying countryside located just over 80 kilometers north of Berlin, extending toward the Baltic Sea to the north, bordered by Holstein to the west, and Pomerania to the east. Not far from Rechen stood the notorious Ravensbrück concentration camp for women, a site of extreme brutality that functioned as an integral component of the Nazi apparatus of repression. The surrounding region, however, was known for its picturesque landscape, remarkably quiet and serene, characterized by open fields, scattered forests, and numerous. Her parents were Alfred Anton Albert Greiser and Berta Wilhelmina Winter. Her father worked as a local estate manager, and during this period, Eva's father voluntarily enlisted in the military, leaving her mother to shoulder the responsibility of caring for and raising the children on her own. Family garden and a small number of animals, including pigs, geese, and chickens, while also managing livestock and estate-related duties for another household. The community in which Greiser grew up was composed largely of agricultural laborers belonging to the lower middle strata of society. As a result, her parents' occupations afforded the family a slightly more stable financial position than that of many neighboring households. Greiser was the third of 5 children, with siblings Helene, Lieschen, Alfred, and Otto. Speaking during the Belsen trial, Helene testified, "When we were at school, the girls would sometimes quarrel and fight, but my sister never had the courage to fight. On the contrary, she would run away." Some psychologists, however, have suggested that Irma suppressed negative emotions and inner rage, releasing them only when she came into possession of power, specifically when she exercised near absolute authority within the concentration camp environment, a setting deliberately structured to permit the uninhibited expression of brutality. The war crimes prosecutor, Colonel Backhouse, also argued during the trial that Irma Greiser's innate lack of self-confidence played a significant role in propelling her toward cruelty. He observed that her timidity vanished the moment she put on the swastika, and that once endowed with authority within the Nazi apparatus, Irma became the hyena of Auschwitz, a sobriquet used by witnesses to convey the extent of her wartime savagery. In 1933, when Irma was 9 years old, her primary school underwent significant changes to its curriculum, much like every other school in Germany following Hitler's and the Nazi Party's rise to power just 2 months earlier. Braun was educated at a Catholic secondary school in Munich and subsequently spent a year studying at a business school operated within the convent of the English Ladies in Simbachem Inn. Numerous accounts indicate that she appeared to be a typical adolescent girl, displaying a strong interest in clothing, boys, and cosmetics. She showed little enthusiasm for academic study and generally achieved only average grades. She enjoyed outdoor activities and developed a particular fondness for sports such as swimming and skiing, interests she maintained in later years, including after she became acquainted with and entered into a relationship with Hitler. At the age of 16, she enrolled at the Marienhof Institute, a Catholic vocational school focused on practical training. There, she studied subjects related to domestic arts and secretarial work, including bookkeeping and typing. At the time, this educational path was regarded as an appropriate and viable option, particularly for a young woman from a family lacking substantial financial resources or clear social standing. It was considered an ideal model of education oriented toward marriage, in which female students were trained in practical skills deemed necessary to support themselves and to adapt to adult life. As a result of the training she received at this institution, Eva acquired a solid foundation that enabled her to seek stable employment after completing her studies. At the age of 17, Braun began working for Heinrich Hoffmann, the official photographer of the Nazi Party. Initially, she served as a shop assistant and sales clerk before quickly learning to operate cameras and carry out film development processes. In later years, Braun's younger sister Gretel also joined Hoffmann's establishment in 1932, and for a period the two sisters shared an apartment. It was during this time that Braun began dyeing her hair to achieve the distinctive blonde shade for which she later became known. This specialized line of work afforded Eva certain privileges, particularly given that she was employed under Heinrich Hoffmann, a central figure within the propaganda apparatus of the Nazi Party. Braun remained in this profession for more than a decade thereafter, including during the period in which she became the secret companion of the Führer of Nazi Germany. Over the course of these years, she also had the opportunity to develop and explore her personal abilities in other areas, such as media, fashion, and beauty. This position provided Eva with the opportunity to come into contact with Adolf Hitler. Hoffmann was among the small circle of Hitler's most loyal confidants, serving not only as a photographic journalist within the Nazi propaganda system, but also as a close personal friend. There is relatively little documentation concerning the relationship between Hitler and Eva Braun. Much of what is known is derived from post-war testimonies and memoirs of witnesses, including Hoffmann himself. At the time Hitler first became acquainted with Eva, he was 40 years old and was 23 years her senior. According to several accounts, in 1929, Adolf Hitler entered Heinrich Hoffmann's photographic studio. Eva Braun, then 17 years old and working as Hoffmann's assistant, had stepped out to purchase beer and food to offer to the visitor. Upon her return, the young blonde woman wished Hitler an enjoyable meal, an action that reportedly drew his attention. As recalled by Hoffmann's daughter, Eva had light blonde hair cut short and blue eyes. Despite having been educated in a Catholic convent, she knew how to attract others. Some contemporaries even regarded Braun as the most beautiful girl in Munich. Eva was unaware of the identity of the man with the peculiar mustache when she first encountered Hitler. Reflecting on that moment, Heinrich Hoffmann later suggested that Braun's physical attractiveness, combined with what he described as her somewhat naive appearance, embodied the kind of relaxation that Hitler was seeking. Subsequently, Hitler reportedly took the initiative in offering to escort Eva home, an invitation she declined. Hoffmann later suggested that Eva may not have recognized Hitler at the time as the uncompromising leader of the Nazi movement, whose political power and notoriety would, in later decades, become widely known and firmly established. According to Hoffmann, Hitler initially displayed limited interest in Eva, despite her clear and open expressions of admiration toward him. He maintained that Hitler's voice, gaze, and gestures never conveyed any deeper interest in her. Braun, however, desired more than this. According to the historian Alan Bullock, it was Braun who ultimately came to shape the direction of the relationship with Hitler. She told her friends that Hitler was in love with her and that she would make him marry her, Bullock noted. Many observers have suggested that a figure such as Hitler would have been particularly appealing to Eva, given her upbringing in an unhappy family environment, which may have made her susceptible to the overt display of authority embodied in a dominant paternal figure. Nevertheless, Hitler's subsequent actions indicate that he did, in fact, develop a genuine interest in Eva. At one point, he reportedly instructed his secretary, Martin Bormann, to conduct a discreet investigation into her background in order to confirm whether she was of Aryan descent. Bormann ultimately verified that Eva Braun did not possess any Jewish ancestry. Hitler consistently maintained the image of a bachelor, believing that this status enhanced both his authority and his public appeal. Consequently, regardless of any personal feelings he may have harbored toward others, he refrained from expressing them openly. This constituted one of the primary reasons for his reluctance to acknowledge his relationship with Eva. He was once quoted as saying, "I am married to the German people and to their destiny." The Nazi leader was unwilling to subject himself to familial obligations or pressures, nor did he wish to render himself, as he put it, vulnerable within domestic life. Nevertheless, during this period, he repeatedly displayed a level of attention toward Eva that exceeded what might be considered ordinary. Whenever he visited the studio where Eva worked for Hoffmann, he often took the initiative to spend time conversing with her, occasionally offering gifts and even proposing to escort her home. Despite these gestures, their relationship at that time had not yet been formally defined. This state of ambiguity persisted for some time, and it was not until approximately 2 years later that their association gradually developed into a more serious relationship. During this same period, Hitler was living with his niece, Geli Raubal, the daughter of his half-sister, in the apartment at 16 Prinzregentenplatz in Munich, until her death. The relationship between Hitler and Raubal has been regarded as one of intense emotional attachment and particular significance in his life. Some unverified sources have suggested that a romantic relationship may have existed between the two. However, what can be stated with certainty is that all information relating to Geli was subject to strict secrecy, control, and limitation. Geli moved into her uncle's household while studying in Munich and remained there for a short period after completing her education. At one point, she became involved in a romantic relationship with Hitler's personal chauffeur, an affair that led to the driver's immediate dismissal. From that moment onward, Geli's personal life was placed under close surveillance and near total control. Later, when Geli expressed a desire to marry a man from her hometown, this sparked a serious conflict as Hitler categorically forbade the relationship. On the 18th of September 1931, Raubal was found dead in the apartment with a gunshot wound to the chest, in what was clearly an act of ending herself using Hitler's pistol. Hitler was in Nuremberg at the time. Many have speculated that Geli may have been attempting to free herself from Hitler's oppressive control. Geli's death further damaged Hitler's reputation, giving rise to accusations that he had maintained an incestuous and abusive relationship with his niece. He succeeded in reversing public opinion and eliciting sympathy from his political supporters by presenting himself as deeply shattered by the death of his niece. He ordered that her room be preserved exactly as it had been, and kept her portrait in every residence in which he lived for the remainder of his life. Following Raubal's suicide, Hitler began to see Braun with increasing frequency. This relationship was maintained under conditions of near total secrecy, facilitated in part by the fact that he could visit Hoffmann regularly and that Eva was employed at Hoffmann's establishment. Their meetings reportedly took the form of shared meals, cinema outings, and other encounters conducted with particular discretion, often taking place at Hoffmann's studio or residence. Hitler remained adamant in cultivating the image of a bachelor wholly devoted to his political mission and to the nation, an image that also garnered sympathy and approval from many German women. This was especially significant given the circumstances which ran counter to the normative ideals promoted by the Nazi regime, not least the fact that Eva was 23 years his junior. As a result, Eva assumed the role of a companion in the shadows, a relationship that was never publicly acknowledged. In 1932, by which point the Nazi Party had achieved a major victory in the parliamentary elections, Hitler, as the leader of the National Socialist movement, effectively assumed power over Germany. During this period, his political career became increasingly demanding, leaving little time for personal engagements or attention toward his companion in the shadows. Braun attempted to end herself on either 10th or 11th August 1932 by shooting herself in the chest with her father's pistol. The shot was not fatal, though Hitler was reportedly deeply shocked by the incident. Historians generally consider this attempt to have been non-lethal and carefully controlled, viewing it primarily as an effort to draw Hitler's attention. Nevertheless, it proved effective. After Braun's recovery, Hitler became more attentive and emotionally attached to her, and by the end of 1932, they had formally become lovers. Despite this development, their relationship continued to be conducted in secrecy. Braun frequently stayed overnight at Hitler's apartment in Munich when he was in the city, and she also traveled with him to Obersalzberg, on occasion accompanied by her sister Gretel. From 1933 onward, Braun worked as a photographer for Hoffmann. This position enabled her to travel with Hoffmann as part of Hitler's entourage in the capacity of a photographer for the Nazi Party. She also worked for Hoffmann's art printing business, which was well known for producing postcards for the Great German Art Exhibition. In addition to this, Eva effectively became an unofficial party photographer. She sold photographs of Hitler and other Nazi leaders and officials to Hoffmann, in return for which she received generous remuneration and favorable treatment. Her professional role made her continued access to and closeness with Hitler appear more natural and discreet. Throughout this period, Hoffmann appears to have played a crucial role in legitimizing their meetings and serving as an effective shield, concealing the nature of their relationship from public scrutiny. To outside observers, Eva was merely a photographer working under Hoffmann's authority. According to numerous accounts, even during gatherings limited to close friends and trusted associates, held in locations considered absolutely secure and private, Hitler and Eva restrained themselves from displays of behavior or language that might exceed accepted boundaries. In 1935, Braun was deeply distressed upon learning that Hitler had taken a new lover, though she was aware that she could not expect fidelity from him. "I will never interfere if he finds another romantic relationship. Why should he concern himself with me?" Braun wrote in her diary. Nevertheless, Braun appeared to remain deeply frustrated by what she perceived as Hitler's emotional neglect. She complained that he failed to give her a gift for her 23rd birthday. "So I bought myself some jewelry, a necklace, earrings, and a ring. I hope he likes them. If not, he may buy something for me," Braun wrote. According to an entry in her diary and the account of biographer Naren Gunn, Braun's second suicide attempt occurred in May 1935. During this period, her emotional state was frequently unstable, at times reaching extremes that bordered on hysteria. She ingested an excessive quantity of sleeping pills after Hitler once again failed to devote time or attention to her. In his memoirs, Albert Speer recorded his dissatisfaction with Hitler's treatment of Eva Braun during the early years of their relationship. Hitler appeared dismissive and, at times, openly disrespectful toward her. Speer observed that on one occasion, Hitler did not even kiss her goodbye or take her hand as she departed from the Berghof. Instead, he merely handed her an envelope, which likely contained money. Following this second suicide attempt, however, Hitler seemed to show Eva greater favor and consideration. At the same time, numerous accounts and reports point to Hitler's involvement in other brief affairs and clandestine relationships. Some sources indicate that he also maintained a particularly close relationship with the prominent film director, Leni Riefenstahl, who had been personally commissioned by the Führer to produce the film Triumph of the Will, documenting the 1934 Nazi Party rally in Nuremberg. Upon learning of this, Eva reportedly made every effort to drive a wedge between the two. Whatever the true nature of their relationship may have been, it is evident that Eva Braun occupied a central place in Hitler's life. Although she was excluded from most official ceremonies and diplomatic functions, she was nonetheless firmly established as the undisputed companion of the household, even if this status was recognized only among those within the inner circle. In August of that year, Hitler provided Braun and her sister with a 3-bedroom apartment in Munich, and the following year, the two sisters were given a villa in Bogenhausen at Wasserburgerstrasse 12, now Delpstrasse 12. By 1936, Braun was present within Hitler's household at the Berghof near Berchtesgaden when he resided there, though she continued to live primarily in Munich. She maintained her own apartment in the new Reich Chancellery in Berlin, designed by Albert Speer, as well as a seaside residence near Pobierowo, now in Poland, where she occasionally vacationed. Braun was part of Hoffmann's staff when she attended the Nuremberg rally for the first time in 1935. Reports indicate that when Magda Goebbels, the wife of the head of the Nazi propaganda apparatus, encountered Eva's presence, she was completely shocked by what she described as a moody and dissatisfied-looking girl seated on the VIP platform. When these disparaging remarks reached Hitler, he reportedly reacted with fury and refused to meet Magda for 6 months. This incident underscores the exceptional degree of indulgence and protection Hitler extended to Eva, privileges that were rarely, if ever, granted to others. Hitler's protectiveness and preferential treatment toward Eva were reaffirmed when he refused to allow even his own half-sister Angela, Gelli's mother, to criticize his companion. Angela had objected to Eva's presence at the Nuremberg rally and was subsequently dismissed from her position as housekeeper at the Berghof. Scholars have been unable to determine whether her dislike of Braun was the sole reason for her departure. However, from that point onward, other members of Hitler's entourage regarded Braun as untouchable. Angela, who harbored a clear dislike of Eva, gradually became estranged from her brother shortly after Eva assumed a permanent position as Hitler's de facto companion. Eva was effectively the only person who could freely invite others onto the Berghof estate, including her sister and childhood friends. These circumstances may also have contributed to the resentment she aroused among certain members of the Nazi leadership. Hitler sought to present himself as a figure of moral purity. Within Nazi ideology, men were cast as political leaders and warriors, while women were relegated to the domestic sphere. Hitler believed that he was attractive to women and wished to exploit this appeal for political advantage by remaining unmarried, as he felt that marriage would diminish his allure. He and Braun never appeared together in public as a couple. The only occasion on which they were photographed together in a published news image was when she was seated near him at the 1936 Winter Olympics. Many Germans remained unaware of Braun's relationship with Hitler until after the war. Braun had her own room adjoining Hitler's quarters at both the Berghof and the Führerbunker complex beneath the garden of the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. When Hitler purchased the Berghof in 1933, it was little more than a small mountain lodge situated on the slopes of the Obersalzberg. Extensive renovations were initiated in 1934 and continued until their completion in 1936. The original structure was expanded through the construction of a large additional wing, and numerous auxiliary buildings were subsequently erected. The entire area was placed under strict security. The remaining houses on the mountainside were gradually acquired by the Nazi Party and then demolished. Braun, along with other members of Hitler's close entourage, was almost completely isolated from the outside world whenever she resided there. Albert Speer, Hermann Göring, and Martin Bormann also built private residences within the compound. In his memoirs, Heinz Linge, Hitler's trusted personal valet, recorded that at the Berghof, Hitler and Braun occupied separate bedrooms and bathrooms connected by an internal door. Hitler typically spent much of the evening alone with Braun in his study before they retired for the night. At such times, Braun would often wear a dressing gown or indoor jacket and drink alcohol, while Hitler confined himself to tea. No displays of physical intimacy or affectionate contact were ever shown in the presence of others, even within the secluded environment of the Berghof, a private space accessible only to those within the innermost circle. Braun functioned as a hostess during receptions for familiar guests, although she did not participate in the management of household affairs. She also frequently invited friends and relatives to stay, and was the only one among the regular guests who did so. Rochus Misch, Hitler's closest bodyguard and the first person to discover the bodies of Hitler and Eva Braun, later recounted in a book that after being seriously wounded during the Polish campaign of 1939, he was invited to join Hitler's personal security detail. In this role, he witnessed the Nazi leader and his companion maintaining a close and intimate relationship well before it was ever publicly acknowledged. Eva was permitted to reside at the Berghof, Hitler's dreamlike residence in Obersalzberg, Bavaria. To visiting generals and guests, Hitler introduced Eva as his housekeeper, yet her room and Hitler's were connected by an internal door. On one occasion, Misch even recalled seeing Eva dressed in a light nightgown walking through the guest bedroom while he was delivering correspondence to Hitler. For Hitler, his relationship with Eva was regarded as detrimental to the political career he was constructing. As a result, at the Berghof in Berchtesgaden, some sources indicate that Hitler forbade his companion from traveling by airplane beyond the area or from driving a car on her own. Moreover, the Nazi dictator reportedly prohibited household staff and residents throughout the Berghof region from engaging in conversation with Eva. Whenever Hitler received important guests at his private residence, his companion was instructed to withdraw to her private quarters. Consequently, only a very small number of high-ranking Nazi officials were fully aware of the nature of Hitler's relationship with Eva Braun. Eva Braun's life was thus consistently shaped by Hitler's strict control and manipulation, and she was never free to interact openly with the outside world. She never appeared publicly alongside Hitler in the manner of other couples. Among families connected to Hitler's inner circle and key figures of the Nazi Party, many believed that Hitler was a man marked by extreme narcissism and deep insecurity. He dominated conversations with long, self-aggrandizing monologues and was incapable of tolerating challenges or any form of contradiction. Yet he showed a particular indulgence toward Eva, who was the only person within his close circle to dare to oppose him on a regular basis. In fact, she was initially quiet, modest, and unassuming within Hitler's social milieu in Munich and at the Berghof, but over time she grew increasingly confident, encouraged by the special favor Hitler bestowed upon her. Persistent questions and doubts have long been raised by scholars, historians, and later observers as to whether Eva was involved in, influenced, or even had knowledge of Nazi political affairs. Some accounts suggest that despite being Hitler's companion for more than a decade, Braun never formally joined the Nazi Party. Nevertheless, she supported Hitler's policies and gradually became one of the most important figures within the dictator's inner circle. By the late 1930s and throughout the 1940s, leading Nazi figures such as Albert Speer and Joseph Goebbels sought out Braun as a means of cultivating closer ties with Hitler. Braun and Hitler kept their relationship strictly private, concealed from the German people and the wider public. Numerous sources indicate that Eva appeared to exert little to no influence over Hitler's political decisions, and that he chose her as his companion precisely because he believed she could not, and would not, challenge his authority. Biographer Heike Gerdemaker wrote that women played no significant role in Nazi politics. Braun's political influence over Hitler was minimal. She was never permitted to remain in the room during business or political discussions and was sent away whenever cabinet ministers or other important figures were present. She was not a member of the Nazi Party. In his post-war memoirs, Hoffman described Braun's outlook as banal and shallow. Her primary interests were sport, mainly skiing and swimming, clothing, and cinema. She lived a sheltered and privileged life and appeared largely indifferent to politics. One instance in which she did show concern occurred in 1943, shortly after Germany had fully transitioned to a total war economy. Among other consequences, this implied a potential ban on cosmetics and women's luxury goods. According to Speer's memoirs, Braun approached Hitler with the utmost indignation. Hitler quietly instructed Speer, who was then Minister of Armaments, to halt the production of cosmetics and women's luxury items rather than impose an outright ban. Speer later remarked, "Eva Braun would be a great disappointment to historians." Moreover, benefiting from Hitler's indulgence, she insisted on having access to sanitary products, while ordinary women were forced to improvise and devise personal means to meet such needs. Clothing rationing likewise did not affect her. Eva continued to change outfits several times a day, typically 3 dresses daily, and on some days as many as 7, most of which were designed and produced by fashion houses from France, Italy, and elsewhere. Some sources portray Eva as lively, charming, and graceful, wholly devoted to Hitler. Others, however, have criticized her in harsh terms, describing her as shallow-minded, morally loose, and selfish. Braun continued to work for Hoffmann after beginning her relationship with Hitler. She took numerous photographs and films of members of Hitler's inner circle, some of which were sold to Hoffmann for substantial sums. She continued to receive income from Hoffmann's company until as late as 1943. Braun also served as Hitler's private secretary, a position that allowed her to enter and leave the Reich Chancellery without attracting attention, using a side entrance and a rear staircase. Gerdemaker notes that Braun and Hitler maintained a normal sexual relationship. Friends and relatives of Braun recalled Eva giggling at a 1938 photograph of Neville Chamberlain sitting on a sofa in Hitler's Munich apartment, remarking, "If only he knew what that sofa had witnessed." Nevertheless, there are many conflicting accounts and interpretations. Numerous historians and biographers have raised doubts and offered speculation. Some argue that Hitler, described as exceptionally cruel, brutal, and even perverse, perpetually consumed by hatred, must have had an abnormal sexual life. Others contend that sexual relations between Eva and Hitler were virtually non-existent. Proponents of this view point to claims that Eva Braun suffered from a congenital condition involving an underdeveloped uterus or vaginal canal, a relatively rare syndrome. Certain sources suggest that she may have undergone surgery in the early 1940s to ameliorate this condition, which would further imply that no sexual relationship existed between the two beforehand, or that if it did, it would have been extremely painful. As for Hitler, some assessments suggest that he was born with hypospadias. He was reportedly obsessively paranoid about being seen naked and even refused examinations by personal physicians if he was not fully clothed. Notably, both individuals were said to share an intense obsession with cleanliness. All of the above remains unverified, and it is likely that the full truth will be difficult, if not impossible, to know with complete certainty. With regard to Eva's relationship to, or influence on, the political sphere, many historians maintain that she possessed little political awareness and had no clear or direct involvement. Eva Braun and her family never truly participated in the Nazi Party, possibly because Hitler himself wished to ensure that she did not join, both to protect her and to preserve her anonymity. Her father was the only member of the family to formally join the Nazi Party, leading many to conclude that the Braun family's support for National Socialism was, at best, reluctant. Some evidence suggests that most members of the Braun family were nonetheless content with the rise of Nazi power and equally content to benefit from Eva's close relationship with Hitler. Eva Braun did not move into a private residence of her own until later, to a property purchased by Hoffmann but paid for by Hitler. Eva worked for Heinrich Hoffmann, and less than 3 years after she began her employment, her younger sister Gretel Braun also came to work at Hoffmann's photo house. Gretel spent a great deal of time with Eva within Hitler's inner circle, so much so that she eventually married Hermann Fegelein. On the 3rd of June 1944, Braun's sister Gretel married SS Gruppenführer Hermann Fegelein, who served as liaison officer to Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler within Hitler's staff. Hitler used this marriage as a pretext to allow Braun to appear at official functions, as she could then be introduced as Fegelein's sister-in-law. When Fegelein was arrested in the final days of the war while attempting to flee to Sweden or Switzerland, Hitler ordered his execution. He was shot for desertion in the garden of the Reich Chancellery on the 28th of April 1945. Later on, in interviews with Naren Gunn, the biographer of Eva, the Braun family appeared not only inclined to downplay the earlier hardships of their family life, but Eva's parents also insisted that they had been completely unaware of any relationship between their daughter and the Nazi leader. According to their account, Hitler had appeared beside Eva only by chance on a single occasion during a meeting in Munich. These explanations, however, seem unconvincing, as Eva's close association and deep involvement with the Nazi apparatus took place openly in Munich and could hardly have escaped the notice of her family. Arguments suggesting that Eva Braun's family kept their distance from the Nazi regime become even weaker when it is noted that, in the final stages of the war, as Munich was subjected to intense aerial bombardment, Eva's parents and siblings sought refuge at Hitler's Berghof retreat. Nevertheless, there was a notable exception within the Braun family: the eldest sister, Eva Braun. Ilse left the family at an early age, and in the very year that Eva began working for Heinrich Hoffmann, Ilse took up a position as a medical secretary for Dr. Martin Marx, a Jewish physician with whom she lived for many years. Despite Eva's entreaties, Ilse resolutely refused to give up this job even after the Nuremberg laws rendered such an employment relationship illegal. It was only when Dr. Marx faced the loss of his medical license and subsequently emigrated to the United States that Ilse finally ended her employment. It is possible that, through Eva's influence, Ilse later worked briefly as a secretary for Albert Speer, before turning to a career in journalism. In contrast to her younger sisters, Ilse's life and professional trajectory show little evidence of sympathy for National Socialism. Nevertheless, there is sufficient reason to believe that those connected to the regime, including Eva's own family, knew far more than they were willing to admit after the war. Adolf Hitler is regarded as one of the most profoundly condemned and reviled figures of the 20th century in world history, owing to the horrific crimes and extreme brutality he inflicted upon humanity, most notably the genocide of millions of European Jews, along with countless other innocent victims. Within this context, many historians and scholars have raised a fundamental question: did Eva Braun, Hitler's closest female companion, truly know and fully comprehend the scale and nature of the crimes he committed against human history? The testimonies and memoirs of individuals who survived within the Nazi apparatus must be approached with caution, as these figures were often engaged in post-war self-justification, producing accounts heavily shaped by ideological bias, racial hatred, and personal motives to exonerate themselves. Most surviving members of Hitler's inner circle uniformly asserted that Eva was apolitical, emphasizing that matters of political or military policy were never discussed in the presence of women. Nevertheless, although the policies and measures leading to the final solution were classified at the highest levels and not widely disseminated, many historians argue that individuals within Hitler's trusted inner circle, including Eva, could hardly have been entirely unaware. According to this line of reasoning, they must at least have been informed of Hitler's determination to eradicate the Jewish population, even if their knowledge of the plan's specific details varied in scope and depth. At the Nuremberg Rally, laws and policies restricting Jews, excluding them from civil occupations and public service, were accompanied by state-sponsored boycotts and systematic exclusion. Beyond this, acts of persecution and public violence were carried out openly. In the face of these inhumane policies, society as a whole maintained an attitude of indifference with little to no opposition. Magda Goebbels, Ilse Hess, and Emmy Göring were women who held formal party status, possessing Nazi Party membership cards as early as the early 1920s. Among them, Magda Goebbels stood out for her prominent public role and her considerable influence over female members of the Nazi Party, and she was often regarded as the First Lady of National Socialism in the period before Hitler's marriage. According to post-war justifications, the husbands within the Nazi leadership were said not to have shared key developments or decisive policies, those they directly supported and implemented, with their wives. Yet this line of argument has always remained deeply questionable and continues to raise fundamental concerns. Were the women within Hitler's inner circle, Eva in particular, truly unaware of the full scale of the crimes and the consequences wrought by the Nazi regime? Could they have remained entirely indifferent, offering no response whatsoever to the inhumane policies and actions carried out by Nazi leaders? The sustained and public support these women expressed for Hitler and his power may itself be a crucial factor in explaining the privileged positions they held within his trusted inner circle. Many historians argue instead that Eva idolized Hitler and appeared indifferent to his actions. Secluded within the private residences, she assumed the role of his de facto wife and seemed entirely unconcerned with, or unwilling to contemplate, the catastrophic genocides carried out by the man she loved. Most of those closest to Hitler retained his favor so long as they did not challenge him or enter into conflict with him, and the opposite was equally true. Henriette von Schirach, the daughter of Heinrich Hoffmann, recounted an anecdote illustrating this dynamic in her memoirs. According to her account, she and her husband Baldur, who had been appointed governor and Gauleiter of Vienna, openly confronted Hitler while at the Berghof. Baldur insisted that Hitler must bring the war to an end, as it was going disastrously for Germany due to the heavy Allied bombing of German cities. Henriette further stated that she challenged Hitler by condemning the deportation of Jewish women in the Netherlands, which she had personally witnessed. In a fit of rage, Hitler reportedly shouted back, "You're being sentimental. What do you care about Jewish women in the Netherlands?" Despite the fact that she was the daughter of one of Hitler's closest and longest-standing friends, Henriette von Schirach and her husband were, from that point onward, apparently never invited to the Berghof again. Hitler was particularly fond of flattery and adulation, and he was willing to bestow power and favor upon those who displayed absolute faith and unconditional loyalty toward him. Over time, a broad consensus emerged in many interpretations that Eva had effectively committed herself to living solely for Hitler. It was perhaps this total devotion that became one of the reasons she received such an exceptional degree of favor and extraordinary privileges from him. This was especially evident during the years of the Second World War, when most of society was confronted with deprivation and the brutal realities of war. Yet Eva continued to maintain a life of luxury, enjoying rare privileges, frequent travel, fine dining, daily comforts, and clothing made from expensive, high-quality materials. In stark contrast to the idealized model of the National Socialist German woman, Eva, in her role as the party's unofficial First Lady, deviated sharply from the norms that were officially prescribed and promoted. She was not bound by traditional expectations such as domestic labor, frugality, or exemplary virtue. Instead, she pursued a life of indulgence, refinement, and conspicuous display. Yet this very contrast may also have played a significant role in reinforcing Hitler's belief in the prospect of a future victory for the Reich. Much like Eva, Hitler himself did not embody the ideal male figure as defined by National Socialist ideology. He did not adhere to the moral standards or lifestyle that the regime promoted. Instead, he regarded himself as a free-spirited and intellectual individual, showing particular reverence for art, architecture, music, theater, opera, and philosophy. The paradox, however, lay in the fact that the very regime he led relentlessly repressed artists and silenced intellectuals who refused to conform to the party line. This stark contradiction between the normative ideals he himself proclaimed and the lifestyle he openly practiced reveals the hypocrisy and moral decay of a system that traded privilege for inhumane ideas, beliefs, and actions. Despite enjoying material privilege and personal favor, Eva longed for recognition in the form of a legitimate marriage and children. Yet, despite her efforts, Hitler continued to refuse this and insisted on keeping their relationship hidden from the public. Albert Speer, one of the leading figures of the Nazi regime, described Braun as an unhappy woman, bound to Hitler with profound devotion. The photographs and film footage preserved by Eva serve as evidence of this. The images and reels she recorded of Hitler were not only intended for sale to Heinrich Hoffmann to help construct and reinforce the public image of the Führer, but were also carefully collected and kept in her own personal albums. Many of these photographs and films convey a sense of sadness and regret, reflecting the fact that she and Hitler were never truly able to marry or build a family together. During periods when Hitler was absent from Bavaria for extended stretches while directing the campaign on the Eastern Front, Eva nevertheless continued to enjoy material luxury. It is clear that Hitler did, in fact, show her particular favor, as he maintained regular contact and telephoned her almost every evening. In early April 1945, Braun traveled from Munich to Berlin to be with Hitler in the Führerbunker. She refused to leave even as the Red Army closed in on the capital. Hitler is known to have described her as the one who came to me when everyone else abandoned me. As Nazi Germany faced imminent defeat, many urged Eva to flee and go into hiding, as Henriette von Schirach had done. She rejected these suggestions, demonstrating what she saw as absolute loyalty, replying, "Do you think I would let him die alone? I will stay with him until the very last moment." In his will, Hitler designated Braun to receive 12,000 Reichsmarks annually after his death, a provision that further underscored the protection, indulgence, and special privileges he granted to his mistress. Hitler and Eva both drew up their wills and planned their flee to heaven once the defeat of Nazi Germany became inevitable. In his will, Hitler stated that he would provide financial support for Eva after his death. Nevertheless, he ultimately emphasized loyalty as the defining quality he attributed to her. The two decided to marry shortly before carrying out their dead ending. The wedding and the final days of their lives were spent in an underground bunker in the company of Hitler's closest associates. During this period, Hitler's mental state was marked by rage and agitation. He repeatedly displayed anger as the enemy drew ever closer and as former collaborators increasingly abandoned him or turned against him. In the face of Hitler's dark moods, Eva consistently projected optimism, took care with her appearance, and sought to lift the spirits of Hitler and those in the bunker through small pleasures and diversions such as food, alcohol, and music. Shortly after midnight on the night of the 28th to the 29th of April, Hitler and Braun were married in a small civil ceremony inside the bunker, witnessed by Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann. Afterwards, Hitler held a modest wedding celebration with his new wife. Upon marrying Hitler, Braun's legal name became Eva Hitler. When signing the marriage certificate, she initially wrote the letter B for her surname, then crossed it out and replaced it with Hitler. Braun was very fond of Negus and Stasi, her two Scottish terriers, and they appear in her home movies. She usually kept them away from Hitler's German shepherd, Blondie. Blondie was killed on the 29th of April 1945 by one of Hitler's aides after Hitler ordered that one of the cyanide capsules obtained for Braun and himself to commit die the following day be tested on the dog. Braun's dogs and Blondie's puppies were shot on the 30th of April by Hitler's dog handler Fritz Tornow. Hitler and Eva committed die together. Eva took her own life by ingesting a powerful poison in the form of a cyanide capsule that had previously been tested on Blondie, while Hitler shot himself in the head. The newly married couple prepared food for a meal, but Braun hardly ate. It is reported that she changed into what was described as the Führer's favorite dress, a black dress with white roses around the neckline, and remained with Hitler. According to some accounts, when discussing the method, Hitler stated that he would kill himself with a pistol, a death that would be immediate and swift. Eva, however, expressed horror at this method. She wished to remain a beautiful corpse and proposed instead to end her life by taking poison. She feared pain and reportedly said, "I am prepared to die heroically, but at least I want a death without suffering." After 1 p.m. on the 30th of April 1945, Braun and Hitler said farewell to the staff and members of their inner circle. In his final instructions, Hitler shook hands with his aide Günsche and declared that all soldiers were released from their obligations and no longer bound by their oath of loyalty. Moreover, adhering to the principle that he would never fall into the hands of the enemy, whether alive or dead, Hitler did not want his body to be desecrated or subjected to any form of punishment, and therefore requested that his remains be cremated. That afternoon, at around 3:30 p.m., several people reported hearing a gunshot. After waiting a few minutes, Linge, together with Hitler's SS adjutant Otto Günsche, entered the small study and found the lifeless bodies of Hitler and Braun lying on a small sofa. Eva's body was reportedly found curled up on the sofa, her head turned toward Hitler's corpse. Hitler's eyes were open and staring straight ahead, his head slightly slumped. Their bodies were carried up the stairs and through the emergency exit of the bunker into the garden behind the Reich Chancellery, where they were doused with petrol, set alight, and later buried near Magdeburg. On 11th May 1945, two colleagues of Hitler's dentist, Hugo Blaschke, his assistant Kata Heusermann, and dental technician Fritz Echtmann identified the dental remains as belonging to Hitler and Braun, including a metal dental bridge and gold fillings attributed to Braun. There was no evidence that the Soviets recovered any other remains of the couple. According to Blaschke, Braun had never had a dental bridge fitted. He also stated that Braun's upper left premolar had undergone dental treatment, a detail that was omitted in an autopsy purportedly conducted by the Soviets. The Soviet report, much of which was later disregarded, counted only 11 teeth, in contrast to Blaschke's assertion that she had 26 teeth remaining. In 1974, forensic dentist Reader F. Sognes noted that the Soviets had recorded untreated dental caries that were not documented in the body they claimed to have examined. Heusermann confirmed that a bridge made for Braun had never actually been fitted, stating that the Soviets had found it in the dental room of the Reich Chancellery. Sognes further observed that the non-metal components of the prosthesis would have been destroyed by fire, unlike the porcelain attached to two of Braun's teeth, which should have remained intact. In December 1945, Hitler's pilot, Hans Bauer, claimed while in Soviet captivity that in her final days, Braun had been pregnant with Hitler's child. The remaining members of the Braun family survived the war. Her mother, Franziska, died at the age of 91 in January 1976 after spending her final years on an old farm in Ruhpolding, Bavaria. Her father, Fritz, died in 1964. Gretel gave birth to a daughter whom she named Eva on the 5th of May 1945. She later married businessman Kurt Beringhoff and died in 1987. Braun's sister Ilse was not part of Hitler's inner circle. She married twice and died in 1979. In concluding this first section, it becomes clear that the formative years of Irma Graser's life reflect the profound impact of Nazi Germany's social environment on a younger generation molded by radical ideology. Her time in the League of German Girls and her work in a hospital reveal a trajectory in which obedience was cultivated and ambition within a totalitarian state apparatus was encouraged. Upon entering Ravensbrück as a trainee and later as a guard, Graser began to display a hardened disposition and a tendency to wield authority as a means of domination, even though her actions at this stage remained relatively limited and not yet fully. Nevertheless, these early signs already point to a psychological transformation and to her growing integration into the camp structure of disciplined violence. Yet it is precisely at this stopping point that Graser's story has only just begun to reveal its darkest dimension. What happens when she is granted far greater authority within a major concentration camp where a single individual can oversee tens of thousands of prisoners? To what extent would these early manifestations of cruelty escalate once Graser was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the central hub of Europe's most efficient killing machine? And as former collaborators increasingly abandoned him or turned against, what consequences would arise from the fusion of unchecked power with an individual already acclimated to an environment of violence? Would this nascent brutality continue to intensify into forms of systematic torture, later described by survivors as horrors beyond imagination? And what forces shaped a woman barely in her 20s into a symbol of cold, calculated cruelty, leaving a lasting trauma in the collective memory of the camps? Afterwards, Hitler held a modest wedding celebration with his new wife. Upon marrying Hitler, Braun's legal name became Eva Hitler. When signing the marriage certificate, the next section will open onto the period in which Irma Graser's portrait is exposed with the greatest clarity, as one of the most brutal female guards in the Nazi concentration camp system. From extreme aggression and a pleasure derived from power, to the devastating levels of violence she inflicted at Auschwitz-Birkenau and Bergen-Belsen, these elements combine to transform her into one of the 20th